Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create this mini crossbody bag. Let's get started. Now the patterns for this mini crossbody bag will be available as a PDF pattern pack and as an acrylic template. Now the patterns I am using are a test set, so yours will vary different to those that are in this video. Now to start with, you need to pick which of the two bottoms you want to put on your flap, and then once you've done that we can start creating. So we're going to grab our leather and then lay out our pattern pieces and cut out a more manageable size. Once we've done that, what we can do is then draw around each of our patterns, transferring any maker's marks, and then we can start cutting out. Now what I like to do is cut all my straight bits first. Now for those of you that are interested, there is a link in the description to the leather I have used in this video, and also included within the pattern packs is a instructional guide with all the information about the leather, the thicknesses, where to buy them, as well as all the fittings that I have used in this video. Then I'm going to start doing the rounded corners. So I'm going to be using the sort of nibble technique for this to get my corners nice and round. And then if you need to afterwards, you can go over them with some sandpaper. Now for the D-ring attachments, what I like to do is actually straight edge a bit of my chosen leather and then cut this to the correct size, and then use my patterns to draw on the pointed ends and then cut those out. And we're going to need 2 of these for this bag. Now what we want to do is mark where we can do our edging. So on our main body, what we're going to do is pick one end and place on our flap attachment, and we can draw around that. And then what we're going to do is this is going to be glued on, so we can just rough that area up. For our D-ring attachments, what we're going to do is place our chosen D-ring in, and we're going to fold that over, and we're going to make it so that they are the same size as those on the patterns. And once we are happy with that, what we can do is just mark with a nail on the back side of that where the D-ring is going to be stitched on, and we can rough that area up as well. And we can then transfer this on to the other one. On the flesh side of our main body, what we want to do is mark where the front of the bag is going to be stitched. So to do this, we'll get the front of our bag piece and hold that in place and just draw across the top of it. Now what we can do is follow that whilst it's fresh in our mind with our edge tool and just edge between these 2 points up and around what will be the flap area. Now on the nice grain side, we can go all the way around, avoiding the area where we marked on the bottom of our flap. Now on the front of our body, we can go all the way around that nice grain side, and then on the flesh side, we're just going to go across the top straight edge, which will be the opening of our bag. On our flap attachment, what we can do is just edge around the nice grain side. And we can also go all the way around our little patch that's going to be going on the front of our bag. On our D-ring attachments, we're going to go just on the grain side, and we're not going to go in the area that we marked, which will be attached to the bag. And then on our gusset, we can go all the way around the nice grain side. And then on the flesh side, what we're going to do is just go across those short edges only. And all of this information is included in the information pack that you get with these patterns. Once we've finished our edging, what we're going to do is fancy up the edges a bit. So we're going to apply stain to all of the edges of our bag pieces. We're going to get that nice and polished. We can then go around with our creasing iron and do a hot crease around all the areas where we have been doing our edging. And once we've done that, what we can do is start to do our stitch marking. So we're going to set our dividers to 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters. And what we can do is mark on that stitch line. So we're going to go all the way around that front patch that's going to be on the front of our bag, all the way around the flap attachment. And then on the front of our bag, we're going to go around the 2 long sides and across the bottom, leaving that top section unmarked. On the back of our bag, we're going to mark where that stitching needs to be from our pattern and draw the lines between there. And then on our little D-ring attachments, we're going to place the D-ring into the strap, fold that over and mark with our thumbnail how tight we can get our stitching up to that D, and then we can transfer that to the other side with our set square and then draw in our stitch lines. We can then transfer that once again onto the other of our D-ring attachments. Now once we've marked on where our stitches need to be, we can pick up our chosen stitch marker and do all our stitch marking. Now for me, I'm using a 3.38mm pricking iron. You can use whichever one you like to use the most. Now on our D-ring attachments, what I'm going to do is actually start stitch marking from the point and work my way up so that I know that the point end is going to be nice and even. We can stitch mark all the way around our flap attachment, as well as the patch that's going to be going onto the front of our bag. Now when you're going around the corners, you might find it easier to use a smaller 2-tooth iron. Once we've done our stitch marking, we're going to take our D-ring attachments and do some skiving. So that straight edge, we're going to skive it down to nothing, and then we're going to flip that round and we're going to skive the point end down to about half thickness. And that's just going to be the length of the point long. We can then get our gusset ready. So we're going to set our dividers to the line marked on our patterns, which is 3/8 of an inch wide or 9 millimeters. We can then draw this down the 2 long sides of our gusset, and then we're going to follow this with a stitch groover, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to reduce the thickness here. And I have a video about sharpening your stitch groover if you need to, which will be linked in the description. And now using our French shave, we're going to follow that line that we have just made and skive the ends down to about half thickness. And I do also have a video all about sharpening the French shave, and I will also leave that linked in the description. Now you want to use the French shave nice and carefully because you don't want to take too much off. Now what I do is put that inside tooth in the groove that I have made, and I'm going to do my first run with that, and then I'm going to move out closer to the edge to do the second run and get rid of any excess. Once we've got our gusset prepped, what I'm actually going to do is on the top edge of our little flap attachment, I'm going to do the same and reduce the thickness so there's not such a bump once it's stitched onto the bag. So I'm going to use my stitch groover and groove my line into the leather. And follow that with the French shave. And you can see here, I'm putting that inside tooth into the groove that I have cut, and then I'm moving out closer to the edge because this French shave that I have is only 6 millimeters wide and we are taking off 9 millimeters. So this is the fitting that we will be using, and I have links in the information pack as to where I picked one of those up. And what we're going to do is, with a sharpened screwdriver, we are going to fit that into that front patch. Now, if you are using a different fitting to the one I am, you are going to need to make sure that the marks on the patterns actually fit your fitting. If they don't, you're just going to need to adjust them as required. Once you have got your little slits cut for the legs of your fitting, you can then put that into your leather and fit the backing plate. And once you've got that on, you can fold the legs over. What we can do now is start to assemble our pieces. So we're going to apply glue to the bottom of our flap, as well as to the flesh side of the flap attachment. And what I like to do is actually heat that with a heat gun, because I find it is more sticky, and I also don't have to wait as long for the glue to go off. Once we've done that, we can then attach that onto our bag. And then we can glue on our D-rings. So what we're going to do is start by gluing the flesh side of those little D-ring attachments. And then when the glue has gone tacky, we can fit our D-ring and pinch the leather closed. Now, for the attachment that's going on the front of the bag, what I've actually done is cut out the pattern on the front part of the bag so I can draw that onto my leather. And then what I can do is rough the area up and apply my glue, and also apply my glue to the back side of that little patch fitting that we're going to stitch on. And then once the glue has gone tacky, we can then stick that onto our bag. Now, because the legs on the attachment have folded over on the inside, there is a little bit of a bulge here. So what we're going to do is we're going to press it so that the back part of our leather, our bigger piece, actually takes up the slack around those legs. And once that's nice and stuck down, we can go on and then mark where our D-rings are going to attach to the main bag. Again, I have cut mine out of my backing template, and what we can do is just lightly draw that on and then rough up the area where they're going to be. And then apply some glue to both the main bag and the D-rings. And then when they are tacky, we can actually stick them on. What you can do just to make sure they are stuck in the right place is just measure in from that outer edge with your ruler to make sure they are nice and level. Now what we're going to do is stitch everything that we have just stuck together. So to start with, I'm going to stitch that flap attachment onto the main bag, but there is no order that this needs to be done in. As this isn't an area that's going to need any strength to it, it is just there for sort of decorative reasons to build that part of the leather out so that the fitting fits nicely. I haven't started with a back stitch, and I've just gone straight into my main stitching. I will, however, be finishing with 1.5 back stitches to secure the threads. Moving on to the D-rings, we're going to do 2 back stitches, and then we'll finish with 1.5 back stitches so both of those sides match. And when you're doing your back stitches, you want those threads to sit side by side rather than one on top of the other. We can then stitch on our patch onto the front of our bag with our fitting in. Once we've got all of these parts fitted on, what we're going to do is some finishing touches, because it's easier to do this now than when the bag is together. So with the D-rings and that patch that we've stuck onto the front of our bag, we're going to apply some burnishing gum and get those edges really nice and shiny. And you can either use a polishing cloth or a bone folder. And we can also do this on the inside edge of our flap attachment. Continuing with the flap attachment, if there is any excess that needs to be trimmed, now is the time to do it before the bag is together, as it is a lot easier. Now, if you do need to take off any excess like what I am doing here, then you're going to need to go over that area one more time with your edge tool, and then you can restain this area and get it nice and polished. Once we have done our extra polishing, we can then go around one more time with our creasing iron, because again, it is so much easier to do that now when the bag is in pieces than once it is together. And taking the time to do these finishing touches now really will elevate the bag. Now, once we've done that and we've got that ready, what we can do is mark on with our dividers our 3/8 or 9mm line, and we can then start to apply some glue. So what I'm going to do is actually glue the front of the bag first, and then we're going to glue one side of our gusset. Before we stick the pieces together, what we're going to do is just work that edge that we have sort of reduced the thickness on to get it to start bending around, and it's going to make it a bit easier for us when we stick this onto our bag. So you can use your hand or a bone folder to do this. And then when you're happy, we can start to attach the two together. Now, if you have any clips, this will be the time to use it, because this is quite fiddly. So we're going to start at the top on one side and make sure that our edges are nice and flush. And then we're going to work our way down, making sure that those edges are nice and in line, adding clips as we go. Now, corners on this can be a bit fiddly, so you just have to keep at it and persuade your leather to bend around those corners. And like I said, we're looking to have all our edges nice and flush. And this front side is the more awkward of the two to put together. When we get onto the back a bit later on, it is a little bit easier. So keep at it and keep working your way around the bag. So once you've got your gusset glued onto the front of your bag, what we can do is our stitching. Now, we are going to be starting with 2 back stitches and then 1 stitch over the edge. Once you've done your back stitches, you can then stitch the rest of the bag as normal. Now, when you get down to stitching the corners of your bag, you want to make sure the leather edges are nice and flush. You may need to just push the leather around a bit to make sure that that happens. Now, when you get to the end of your bag, what we're going to do is do our 1 stitch over the edge like we did when we started, and then what we're going to do is 1.5 back stitches, and that way both sides of our bag are going to match. So now we've got the front side of our gusset attached to our bag. What we're going to do is just work that gusset with our hand to help it so that we can get the second side on a bit easier. So you can see I'm folding the edges of that gusset out, both on the edge with nothing attached to it, also where it is attached to the bag on the original side. And this is just going to help when we come to do our attaching of this part to the back of the bag. So you're going to work that cut edge or that skived edge so it is sticking out like we did earlier, and then when you're happy with that, you can apply your glue to the edge of your gusset as well as on your bag. And then when the glue is tacky, we can start to stick this together. Now this side, like I said, is a bit easier to get stuck together. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick one side and make sure our bag lines up with the mark that we made on the flesh side of our bag backing when we did our edging. And then we can put a couple of clips on there, and then we're going to do the same on the other side. So to get those two straight edges stuck in first, and we're going to work our way down those long edges, making sure that our leather is nice and flush, and then adding the clips as we go. And the reason that I'm putting the clips on is so that everything just stays where it is. Because we're still moving the leather around and we're manipulating it, it can just become unstuck a little bit. So by having the clips, it just makes things stay where they should be. And once you've worked down one of the long sides of your bag, you can then finish on the other side, working your way down towards the corners and getting those stuck together. Now the last thing we're going to do is along the short edge, and this is probably the trickier part of this. However, like I said, it's not as awkward as the original side that we've stuck together. We just want to make sure our edges are nice and flush, especially around those corners. And so you should have your bag looking a little bit like this. And then what I'm going to do is actually take these clips off because I find they just get in the way when I'm stitching. And now I know the bag is stuck nice and solid together, I don't need them on there. And so what we can do is now stitch this side. Now this can be a little awkward and we're not necessarily going to be able to keep it in the clams. Now I didn't actually film or a wide angle of this, but what I'm actually doing is I have this bag laid out on my table where I do my work to, and I've put two door stops, one either side of it, to hold it still. And if you've got something heavy that you can stick inside of the bag, then that also really helps to keep the bag from moving. And what we're going to do is stitch this side. So we are going to be doing 3 back stitches on this one, because one of our stitches is going to go over that top edge of the gusset, and this is going to match then the original side that we stitched. And we're going to do the same when we finish. We're going to do 2.5 back stitches so that both ends of the bag match. Now our bag is together, what we're going to do is some finishing touches. So we are going to sand those edges nice and flush so we can get the best results when we apply our stain and do our polishing. And what we can do is also go around the edge of our bag with a bone folder to define the edge of that gusset and get it so the edges of that leather are nice and flat together. What we can do is then go over and restain all of our bag and polish that in. Before going over it with some burnishing gum, and then once again polishing that in so we get some really nice shiny finished edges. The next step that we're going to do is actually go around and re-crease the whole of our bag. Now this can be a bit awkward, so what you can do is hold it over the edge of your desk to make it a little bit easier for yourself, and you should now have your bag looking a little bit like this. Now the final thing we need to do for this part of the bag is to get that attachment fitted in. Now on your pattern I've marked the holes where this clip is going to fit, and you can transfer that onto the flesh side of your bag, and then you want to put your clip in place, making sure that it is nice and central on those holes. So what you want to do is using your scratchel, then make the holes first with them before using a screwdriver and screwing in your 2 screws that are going to keep this attached to your flap. So now the bag is done, we need to create the shoulder strap. So what I'm going to do is cut 2 1-inch or 25mm strips of leather to create my shoulder strap. What I'm then going to do is use the pattern to draw on for the point end. So I'm going to draw around the point and where that first hole is on the pattern, and then I'm going to cut around this. Once I've done that, I'm going to mark on my holes. So for me, I'm going to mark 11 holes in total, 1 inch or 25 millimeters apart. Now you can put as many holes on your strap as you would like. That is completely up to you. Once I've done that, I'm going to even the holes up to ensure they are in the center of my strap. Now, once we've marked our holes on, what we can do is mark the overall length of our strap, which for me is going to be 40 inches or 1016 millimeters. Now onto that, I'm going to add the turn length for where the fitting is going to attach to the strap, which is 2.5 inches or 63.5 millimeters. And what I'm going to do is draw a line across and then I can cut that off. Now, if you want, you can leave your turn just square and just nick the corners, or what you can do, like me, is you can use the pattern and once again mark on that rounded egg point and then cut that. We can then do the same on our second strap, and where that first hole is marked is actually going to be the center of our crew. So we can use our set square and just even that up a bit. We can then mark the overall length for our point strap, which when made up is going to be 15 inches. So I'm going to cut to include my 2.5 inch turn, 20 inches in total, which is 568 millimeters. What I'm going to do then is mark on where I can do my edging. So on the flash side, what I'm going to do is mark 5 inches from the very end. Now that is double our turn length, because once our leather has been turned over, that is where it's going to sit. Now, because I've done rounded points, what I'm going to do is start a little bit further back from that center point that I've just marked on and edge in between. And then once you've done your edging on your flash side, you can flip this over and we can edge all the way around the nice grain side. Now on our point strap, we are going to do the same and mark 5 inches on that turn end. And then we're going to edge up and around, avoiding that area. And then again, on the nice grain side, you can edge all the way around. Once we've done that, we can apply some edge stain and polish the edges of our straps. And then what I'm going to do is also apply some burnishing gum and polish that in as well before going around both pieces of leather with my creasing iron. Once I've done that, I can then punch my crew hole for the buckle. So what I'm going to do is, with my divider set to my stitching width, I'm just going to draw around the end of that point, put my buckle on, and then I'm going to fold the turn over and put my stitching all through the center where I have just done those lines. What I can then do is pinch this nice and tight against the buckle and mark where that is going to close nicely to, and also mark where the rounded part of the point meets the edge of our straight leather. I can then take that all apart and, using my set square, transfer those to the other side of my leather, and then using our dividers, draw in our stitch line on those straight areas before setting them to the middle width of our strap, and then drawing on a point. And I'm going to repeat this for the other 2 turns. Once you've done that, what you can do is your stitch marking. So for these, because I have a central point in the form of that area at the end of my shaped turn, I'm going to start my stitch marking from there and then work my way out to make sure that my stitches finish in the center of the strap. And you can repeat that for the other 2 turns as well. Now for our looping, we're going to wrap this around 2 thicknesses of leather, and for the running loop, we're going to mark where it meets over the other side of the leather, so we've got an overlap in the middle. And we can then cut that and nick the corners. Once we've done that, we can then wrap that once again around the 2 pieces of leather, and now mark where the end of that little loop is, and that is where we're going to do our stitch marking to. So for me, that was 5 stitch marks. So what I'm going to do is mark 5 stitch marks on all 4 ends of this little loop, and I'm going to stitch mark that all the way through. Now for reference, the looping strip that I have got here is 9mm or 3/8 of an inch wide. Now, once we've done that, we want to mark out for our fixed loop. So again, we're going to measure our looping around 2 thicknesses of leather, but this time we're going to mark where the leather meets at the very edge of our strap, and then we can cut that to length. Next, we're going to do some skiving. So on our running loop, we're going to skive both of those stitched ends from 1 stitch mark in, and we're going to skive that down to just under half thickness. We're going to do that on both ends. And once we've done that, we're going to skive the ends of all 3 of our turns, and we're going to skive that down to half thickness, and the length of that is just about where the shape of that turn is. And now we can start to do some assembly. So we're going to start by stitching our running loop. Now this is a bit fiddly, and I do make it look more fiddly than it is in this video because I can't actually see what I'm doing properly because I'm trying to keep my head out from underneath the camera. But what we're going to do is we're going to have 1 needle on a piece of thread with a knot in. We're going to go up through the last hole on one end, and then we're going to go down through the very end hole on the opposite end of our loop, and that's going to bring our loop together. And now we're going to perform a double stitch in this first stitch hole. So what we're going to do is go across 1 on the underside and then come up through the original hole in the top piece. And then we're going to go back down. So that's going to be our double stitch in that first hole. Now what we're going to do is we are going to move a long one on the underside, so on the inside of our loop, and we're going to come out 1 hole back, and then we'll go down through the hole next to it. So we're going to have like a running stitch here, and we're going to do that all the way down our loop until we get to the very end. So we're going to miss 1 on the underside, and then we're going to go back down into the one behind on top, and that's going to keep our stitches all joined up along the loop. Now when we do get to the end, what we're going to do is do a double stitch here. So we're going to go back up through that last hole, and then this time on the way down, what we're going to do is come out in between the 2 layers of leather. We can pull that needle through between those layers, and then what we're going to do is actually push that in between the layers over to the other side of our loop, and then we can start stitching from that side. So again, we're going to start with a double stitch going up through the second to last hole here, and then down into the last hole, and then we're going to do that again to secure the end of the loop down. And then it's just a case of continuing like we did before. So we're going to miss 1 out on the inside of our loop, and then go down and join the stitches up from the top side of our loop. Now when we get to the end of this stitching run, what we're going to do is do a knot. So we're going to pull that last stitch nice and tight, and then what we're going to do with our needle, we're going to go underneath the stitches on one side. We're going to create a bit of a loop with our thread here, and then before we pull that tight, what we're going to do is we're going to put the needle back through that loop, and then we can pull it tight, and that is going to form a knot on our stitches, and we can just pull that tight, and then you can put the needle through the loop just to pull the knot into the loop rather than have it on the edge on the outside. So you should now have your running loop looking something like this. So what we can do is put that on to our buckle strap, and then what we're going to do is we're going to start to assemble these. So we're going to add glue to both the turns where our clip fitting is going to be first. And I'm going to use an air gun just to heat the glue up and get that to set off a little bit faster than if I was just waiting for it. And then once that's gone nice and tacky, we can fit our buckles into the turn and get those stuck down nicely. Now on the buckle end, we are going to be doing something similar. However, what we're going to do to start with is mark where our loop is going to sit. So with the end of our loop held in the middle of the strap, which is going to be in the center of that crew punch, we can then mark where the edge of the leather sits on that loop. And we're going to do this on the flesh side because we want that facing up when we stitch our loop in. Once we've done that, we can then apply the glue to the inside of the turn as well as to the end of our loop on both sides. We can then stick this together once the glue has gone tacky, placing our buckle in first and then sticking that down. Now what we're going to do is we're not going to stick down too hard here at the buckle end because we want to put our loop in. So that we want to sit in between the 2 layers, and I'm going to have that so it is caught in the first stitch. So that front edge of the loop closest to the buckle is going to be sat in between stitch marked 1 and 2. And we can then press that down, making sure that the area on the other side side of that turn isn't stuck down, so we can stick our loop in when we get to that point. We can now do our stitching. So I'm going to start with one back stitch. And then I'm going to do a stitch over the edge to get our leather nice and tight around our fitting. And then I'm going to stitch the rest of this turn as normal using the saddle stitch method. Now what I'm going to do when I get to the other side of my turn where the loop is going to be set to, I'm going to stop my stitching and I'm actually going to pre-awl the last 5 to 6 stitch marks. Now this is going to depend on what stitch mark size you've chosen, so just check on your strap where your loop is as to where to stop your stitching and start your pre-awling. Now once you've pre-awled all the holes all the way through, what we can do is then fit our loop in, making sure that is level with the original side because we don't want to have a wonky loop. When you're happy that that is in the right place, we can start stitching. Now for me, the first stitch here that I'm going to do didn't go through the loop, so I'm just going to stitch that as normal. And now this next stitch will go through the loop. So I'm going to put that loop where I want it, and then using my thumb, I'm going to hold the loop in place whilst I put my awl all the way through, coming out in the original hole that we just pre-awled. Then I can remove my awl and complete my stitch. Now we're going to do the same again. So depending on your stitch mark size will depend how many stitches you have underneath your loop here. Generally it's about 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the loop out the way whilst we do our stitch and all the way through the loop to the other side in the original awl hole, and then complete that stitch. And then what we're going to do is put the needle through the loop to the other side so we don't get one stitch over the top of our loop. And then we're going to do the same, pushing the loop back this time away from us so we can get our awl through that hole and then complete the stitch. And then once we've done that, we can then finish this off. So we're going to do one more stitch, and then we're going to do one stitch over the edge to match the original side and get our leather nice and tight to that buckle. And then we can do our 1.5 back stitches to finish. Now, once we've done that, we can start doing our finishing touches to our shoulder strap. So what I'm going to do is apply some edge burnishing gum to the turns and rub that in with a cloth, or you can use a bone folder to get that nice and shiny. And then what I'm going to do is go over the turns with my creasing iron just to bring that crease line out now it's been stitched. And then finally what we're going to do is we're going to punch the holes in our shoulder strap, and then that is our shoulder strap completed. So we can do that up and put that together. And then we can clip that onto our finished bag. So that is how to create your mini crossbody bag. Now I hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did,